office, wealth management, private client services for people that have large allocations to digital assets. But over the long term, we want to be involved in a lot of different progressive tech. So whether that's AI or space or quantum or robotics, there's a bunch of different technologies that are going to be converging. I've talked about this book before, but if you haven't read The Future is Faster Than You Think, I would highly recommend that book, just so that you can understand the different things that were really on the precipice of adoption as early as 2018. We're here 8 years later in 2026, and we're starting to see regulation around all these things. AI is a big piece of that. You know, you had David Sachs as the AI and crypto czar there for Trump's cabinet, and now we have Patrick sitting in the crypto side of things. I don't know that David is just moved on specifically to AI, or if he's moved into a different role and away from government affairs. I'd have to go look at that, but I know Patrick's now kind of in the seat driving the crypto discussion. We've got, the Clarity Act being marked up this week. Exciting to see that. You've got a lot of large banks and Ripple there in DC tomorrow having continued conversations around that. They did pass the markup with no Democratic support here recently. So unless they do get some Democratic support there in the Senate, I think it's highly unlikely that you're going to see the Clarity Act passed in the short term. Patrick, when he was talking on a podcast the other day, actually it was at Ondo Summit, he mentioned April 3rd is kind of the latest date for which he thought that might get passed. With midterms coming up, I really don't know. If they aren't able to get traction with the way that it's currently written, it may take much longer for that to get passed through as the focus shifts to midterms. And if the Democrats do win enough votes in either the House or the Senate, I do think it's probably going to get much more difficult for the Clarity Act to get passed as it's written. And I do think that there's a possibility that it'll get segregated. I think that the DeFi component of that may get stripped out and voted on later through a separate bill. And you might see just the Clarity Act around the CFTC and the SEC and what their oversight is on when it comes to digital assets. So, allegedly, this person says on TikTok, I think that there's probably going to end up being 3 different crypto bills. We had the Genius Act passed, which is great. That's going to provide demand for U.S. Treasuries for stable coins here domestically in the U.S. when the reverse carry trade unwinds. I've been talking about that for a long time. We do have conflict over there in the Middle East continuing to escalate. We've got like 50% of one of the larger aircraft that the Navy has there in the region. Big deal. You've got Russia continuing to remove people from that region in anticipation of conflict escalating. Airspace and other things have been shut down. Lloyd's of London has increased the cost of insurance to move through the Strait of Hormuz. If that strait gets shut down, well, I shouldn't say if, I think when that strait gets shut down, you are going to see escalating oil prices there in really globally, but I think most dramatically for Japan, which we know is kind of the catalyst for the reverse carry trade unwinding. If they do decide to raise interest rates aggressively, you're going to see bond yields spike, and you're going to see a rotation out of U.S. Treasuries into the Japanese bonds that are issued by the BOJ. And that is the cascade of events that will unfold there when it comes to the domino theory and how XRP will achieve significantly higher prices than what it sits at today, at about $1.40, just hanging out here trending sideways. Was watching Blockchain Backer. You guys know I talk about him infrequently on here. He has been spot on as far as his TA goes. I am not a technical analysis person, but if you're going to follow somebody for technical analysis, I think Blockchain Backer's probably... I've watched a lot of different people over the years, and he continues to be pretty much right on point with the cyclical pattern in crypto, overlaying previous cycles with where we're going through right now. We could see more downside. I know people don't want to hear that, I don't know that it's going to be anywhere near as bad as a lot of people are discussing out there. I don't think we see a 20-cent XRP, but we could see further downside around 88 cents potentially. If there is a continued fall off here, I think that that's going to come from a situation with Tether or the reverse carry trade unwinding, and I think it'll be short lived before we see significant upside in volume on some altcoins. And you'll see a huge consolidation of the crypto market into networks that are going to be used over the long term versus the speculative environment that we live in today with 50,000 plus different tokens out there. Very difficult to figure out what to invest in unless you've been in the space for an extended period of time and have done extensive market research. If you need financial advice on your digital assets and you want a financial advisor that understands the markets that we live in, and we're currently looking at investing in, you can go to digitalwealthpartners.net and go check that out. Our advisors there, we have 27 advisors at this point that can help you and give you financial advice specific to your digital asset portfolio. And they are a subsidiary of Digital Ascension Group, and that's probably a good time for my disclaimer. I am not a financial advisor. I don't give financial advice. I'm just some crazy dude on the internet that comes on here and answers cool questions that people are nice enough to ask. And if you need financial advice, you should always seek professional help on that. This person says you're not crazy. I don't know. Sometimes I feel crazy, and sometimes I feel like I live in an echo chamber. I try not to. I try to get outside information, and then I'm willing to adjust my bias and my thesis based on new data. But most of the data that's currently coming in continues to validate the thesis that I have. So I'm going to continue to go down that path until something changes. But all that being said, do seek other good professional advice when it comes to tax, legal, and finance. That's not my lane. And then separate of that, the opinions expressed here are my opinions. They are not the opinions of Digital Ascension Group or Digital Wealth Partners, which is the SEC registered RIA. Going through an SEC audit right now. The funds over there, the hedge fund, is almost done with the audit, the annual audit that we have. So we're excited to be able to pass those out to the LPs there at Digital Ascension Group, Digital Wealth Partners. And I think people are going to be happy to see all of that information come out. So without further ado, we got a lot of people on here. Again, appreciate you taking time out of your Monday night to come hang out with me and ask great questions. And I always forget to say this, but if you wouldn't mind, please like, subscribe, share with somebody else you think would find value from this. And we'll go ahead and jump into the questions. All right. First up, we got Money Matters Greatly. He says, or she says, I'm not picking genders here. It says, you mentioned that last year if it doesn't hit in 2025 as 100%, it will be $1,000.26. Do you still believe that? And also, once mentioned ETFs alone could bring it to $25. Why hasn't that happened? Love your content. Appreciate your lives. Thank you for the good questions. So I do think that that's absolutely possible here in 2026. It's still predicated on all of the macro events playing out, right? Until we see huge institutional flows and we see a supply shock on XRP, that's unlikely, right? We'll continue to operate in the capacity that we are now until those things play out. But when they do, you could absolutely see, a significantly higher price. On the $25, Paul Barron kind of I don't want to say backed me into a corner because I really like Paul, but he kind of chopped the rest of the thesis out and he said, just ETF volume, what do you think we could see? And I said $25. We haven't seen that yet because the OTC desk and the dark pools haven't really been depleted. The volume from the ETFs haven't moved. They're not making purchases through the exchanges at scale to be able to drive demand and the price to that point. But once we see the depletion of the OTC desk and the dark pools, if you didn't have the additional demand from the exchanges and other institutions and other FOMO, $25 is pretty reasonable in that type of market action. I do think that it'll go substantially higher than that because I think it'll be, kind of an all-at-once deal. The reason I say that is if it's not, you're not going to see the adoption of XRP at scale for the utility that we are all hoping for. The people that might be invested in that asset, and the reason they might be invested in it, if if you don't see that type of institutional demand and that amount of demand all at one time, it's not going to get to the prices required for it to be able to facilitate trade at scale globally, and for it to be adopted as for back-end settlement on the stock market and for FX flows, and potentially for SWIFT. There needs to be enough liquidity in the asset for that to take place. And if you don't see, an unreasonable amount of demand on the asset with a constricted supply, you're not going to get that price level. So, I do think that that's still highly probable here in 2026. You've got all of the tailwinds to be able to push it there. Conflict in the Middle East, potentially oil rising, huge inflows to FX as people swap back from different currencies to the yen to be able to repay their loans when that unwinds. And then, implications for Tether. Tether is one of the largest sovereign holders for gold at this point. They purchased around, what I saw, again, don't quote me on this, was 27,000 tons, or 27 tons of gold in Q4 last year. So that's a lot of gold that Tether's got on their balance sheet at this point. If you do see gold fall back to what I think is going to be around 2,200, 2,100, and silver back to $50, again, could be very short-lived on those things. But I do think it does need to come back to those levels to touch technical support, which used to be resistance, in order for them to move higher. That would absolutely be enough of a move down in gold to cause Tether to have, this person says Tether depegging could cause solvency issues for exchanges. Yes, that is exactly what I think is going to happen. And then you have demand from exchanges for XRP. And again, this isn't me saying this stuff. This is an amalgamation of research that I've done over the years. If you go back and you look at the Shane Ellis theory, Shane Ellis was the gentleman's name, used to work at Ripple. His theory was that Bitfinex could go insolvent if there was an issue with Tether, and that could drive the price of XRP to $589 by itself, right? That would be exclusive to that exchange. You've seen XRP's price jump on a few exchanges. Both Upbit and Kraken have had, around $100 XRP for a very short period of time on those exchanges when there wasn't enough supply to meet demand. So I think that could be the situation across all exchanges if there was, again, a supply shock. I don't know that we're going to see that here in the short term. You did have Ripple release its escrow on the 1st, just like it does every month. And then some of that XRP has moved out of the wallets that they were holding onto the market, it looks like. Whale alerts is a great way to be able to follow that and then be able to go look at the on-chain data through XRP scan to be able to find and track, where all of that XRP went. But Ripple does fund their business by selling XRP. I don't make any bones about that. Other people think that that's a bad thing. I think that they're using that to be able to gain all of the adoption in the market to make sure that XRP is successful. You even had Brad reiterate that today on Mr. Mann's post. Shout out to Mr. Mann. He's had me over there on his deal a few different times. Love his group. A lot of good people in that group. If you're not, part of his Patreon, I would go check it out. A lot of good people in the community, and again, to see Brad reiterate that, after him stating that Ripple is continuing to champion XRP, and it is, not lost on RLUSD, and they're not trying to remove it. I can say that I've heard from Brad's mouth on multiple occasions at speaking engagements where he has stated that XRP is still core and central to Ripple's ethos. This person says Ripple is a scam. They just use retail to further their endeavors. Oh yeah, the super chats. I'll get to the super chats.
No, this one's...
I know, I will do that.
Sorry.
My wife always trying to make sure I take care of people. She's a nice lady. Sometimes. Anyway, this person says Ripple is a scam. I don't think Ripple is a scam at all. So I think that they have a bigger picture than most people really understand, right? Like I just said, I don't make any bones about it. Ripple absolutely does sell XRP onto the market to fund their business. They have made acquisitions through the sale of that XRP and generating that revenue that have increased institutional adoption and enterprise value for them to be able to divert their income away from selling XRP to the actual service that they provide. Ripple would be like the DAT of the private markets. If you were going to invest in private markets and you wanted a digital asset treasury company, Ripple would absolutely, fit that criteria. Even in one of the shareholders' letters that Brad put out, he alluded to the valuation that he believes Ripple's worth, which is much higher than the current valuation on the market. Top 10, by the way, private companies in the world now at a $50 billion valuation. Stripe, XAI, SpaceX, Data Blocks or Bricks. There was a bunch of them on the list that were a little bit above them. But shout out to Ripple that's a huge achievement. But that just goes back to the enterprise value that they've created through the acquisitions of Hidden Road, G Treasury, Rail, Palisade, Medico, and the other ones that they purchased earlier on. I've got a full video on that here on the YouTube channel if you want to go check that out. But, with those acquisitions, they now have a full stack of those solutions that they're able to provide for institutions and enterprises that they're calling Ripple One, which is great, by the way. And I think that you're going to see a huge amount of adoption, and really until the XRPL or the mainnet is capable of facilitating payments at scale through the amendments that have been proposed, I don't think you're going to see the institutional adoption. I mean, you could. I've talked about R3 being able to leverage XRP to settle through Court of Settler, which is absolutely possible. And that's the other piece. It's not just Ripple that leverages XRP. There are other institutions and enterprises developing things in this space and partnering with other large financial institutions and sovereign countries that leverage the XRPL for settlement. So, all that being said, I still think that they're probably significantly undervalued at around $120, $130 a share, which is where they're currently trading at on the secondary market. I've seen some higher than that too. I've seen 140, 150 also. And if you want to go check that out, you can go to notice.co. They aggregate all of the buys and sales for a bunch of different private equity companies, like 250 different companies across all the brokers, and then they chart that for you. So it's a pretty cool website if you want to go check it out. So my wife reminded me there's these other super chats. I'll go ahead and get into these. We got Sir Yuri from last week. They say BR plus MSTR, so BlackRock plus MSTR, which is MicroStrategy. Between those two, they hold 1.5 million Bitcoin plus the ETFs. Why would they let Bitcoin fall, costing billions? Reversal signals, GLI, Bitcoin versus gold, longs are wiped, R2K breakout, QE, this is a lot of stuff, QE, crowd calls, 50K, MM fades, Clarity, Act, Catalyst. Why am I wrong? So, how do I say this? Sometimes, or would you agree with me that the government and institutions have orchestrated crises before in order to be able to implement change? Yes, no? You can have your own thoughts on that. I think yes. And if that's the case, I agree with you. Bitcoin for sure has systemic risk at this point, for sure. Pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, almost every financial product has created some solution where there is some exposure to Bitcoin in some capacity. The ETFs have been a huge driver for liquidity moving into Bitcoin and those allocations for it to now have systemic risk. I was actually at, there was a person over here that mentioned XDC. The first event that XDC put on in Austin 2.5 years ago, they had a professor from the University of Texas, UT Austin, come and speak on Bitcoin and systemic risk. And at the time, we did not have the ETFs. This was back in, well, I guess it's longer than that. This was August of 2023. We didn't get the ETFs until January of 2024. At the time, Bitcoin really didn't have systemic risk. There was exchange risk, right, like in crypto market risk, but we really didn't have allocations from institutions. At this point, and to this gentleman's question, They absolutely do. That there's, call it 5% of the supply is held in the ETFs by just MicroStrategy and BlackRock. And there's other ETFs also, right? So all that being said, if you wanted to implement a reason for back-end settlement of the stock market to move to T+0, the only way to really do that and force that narrative would be to be able to de-risk from Bitcoin, because the rest of the stocks are fine. Like, they don't have to be tokenized. They can trade T+1 in the settlement between the clearinghouses and the brokers. And we've seen that break a couple times, through the Wall Street Bets debacle with both GameStop and AMC. When they ran those stocks up, they had to halt trading because they fronted too much money from the clearinghouse to the broker. And then also they oversold the stock, right? So tokenizing the stock market would provide a lot of efficiencies and an accounting mechanism across all of those counterparties so that you couldn't oversell stocks, which would be great. Now, the T+0, right? Bitcoin settles 30 to 45 minutes, really, before there's 3 different validations on the network, and it actually settles, between exchanges. If you're doing it wallet to wallet, it might settle sooner. But that's also why it doesn't work for peer-to-peer payments, because there's latency, and also the cost to be able to send a transaction on the network is too high to buy a $5 cup of coffee. Now you could argue that you could use the Lightning Network and other layer 2s, but you just had Ethereum come out and say that their original thesis on layer 2s being the solution is not the solution, that it's got to be a layer 1. So all that being said, if there are huge unrealized losses in Bitcoin from significant downside because of other market volatility or implications for Tether or rotations out of the ETF, the investment banks and other people that have these allocations are now hugely in the red, and they have no way to de-risk for at least 24 hours because it settles T+1. If you move to real-time settlement on the back end of the stock market, you could de-risk from those positions much faster. And that's what my thesis is. When we do see, significant downside in Bitcoin and the rest of the market, they're going to have to move to T+0. They actually already have that option in place because of Project Ion. And when they moved to T+1 on May 28th of 2024, they had an option in there to move to T+0 with settlement through a digital asset. The only digital asset currently in the US that has regulatory clarity from the courts, or really, anything aside from the SEC and the CFTC, is XRP. Until the Clarity Act is passed, it has a moat. It's the only thing that could scale and meet the TPS requirements. And that would involve, the subnet that Bob Way currently has the patent on to be utilized. And you would also need, Project Ion could utilize it without that, but you've got these other amendments that have been passed on the XRPL in the last few years, and the side chains that have been created to be able to facilitate this. We're waiting on permission DEX, and once permission DEX is in place, I think you're going to see institutions come in droves to settle through XRP for their payment flows. You've already got digital identity, you have credentials, you have permission domains, and the last piece of that for those payment flows is a permission DEX. Because they don't want everybody to have access to that data. It's only going to be visible to people that have the credentials to be able to access, that piece of it. And zero knowledge proof is a big piece of why institutions would leverage the XRPL with side chains and the mainnet once these things are in place. So that happens here in the next few days. We've got token escrow that goes live in the next 3 days. And then you've also got permission domains, permission DEXs, which will go live on February 18th. So all of that coming to the XRPL in the very near future, along with DeFi. You've got pseudo accounts or vault accounts alongside Borrow Lend. All of that stuff is going to be an explosive adoption of the XRPL here in 2026. So I don't know that I answered your question specifically, but hopefully you can understand why I think there will be volatility in Bitcoin, even though there are significant allocations by these financial institutions and other parties. All right, next up, we've got, says my question were, one, so there's three-part question here. One, Mr. Saylor has STRC, which with monthly payout option. How sexy is it to your team? Is it worth reverse engineering to make an XRP version of this for the market? So we're working on a yield product right now for XRP. There is one dividend paying ETF for XRP that's already been launched. How they're generating that return, I'm not sure. It's got to be from other inflows, because there's not really a way to be able to generate returns on the XRP itself inside of an ETF. ETFs are limited into what they can do. They can't leverage the asset. There can't be a second lien holder. It has to be backed 1-to-1 for the shares, based on whatever the ratio is for how they're issuing it. So without native DeFi on the XRPL, it would be difficult, because Mr. Saylor and MicroStrategy is a DAT play. They have a lot more freedom to what they can do with the collateral on their balance sheet versus somebody else. And this product would be an ATM or at the market offering, where it is a convertible note or option on the shares for the company that pays you an interest. It's a debt instrument that they've issued to be able to raise more capital, to be able to buy more Bitcoin with. And they do have to service that, right? But I don't know that a lot of people have picked the monthly payout option. But yes, I do think that there will be a lot of products that come to market in the next 12 months for XRP in this capacity. I don't know that, we're working on solutions where people have XRP that can participate in this stuff. Other people will just want to make an allocation in their, traditional portfolio to a product, a DAT, an ETF or something else that pays them a monthly return like you stated here. Number 2, the XRPL has way too many gold options. Which one does Ripple recognize, or which one should we keep a close eye on? For gold issued on the XRPL, to your point, I think that there's going to be a lot of RWAs, issued on the XRPL in the near future, and there already are. There aren't any that I'm currently, really watching closely. I think we're in the early days for that, and it's going to be hard to pick winners right now. So I'm going to wait to see kind of which ones play out and which ones are going to be adopted. And then those will probably be the ones that, if I would hold a gold derivative on the XRPL, would make an allocation to. And then the third question says tinfoil hat time. I don't have my tinfoil hat on my tiger like I normally do. I need to turn my little light on. There you go. Now you can see DWP back there. Tinfoil hat. I think someone at JP Morgan is a time traveler. Oh boy. To have the dedication to buy silver at the point of repricing soon, making them failure proof from balloon payments, from bound to fail commercial reality with interest rates, refinance to unlimited asset acquisition in the state of a collapse, to be permanently number one. I don't think you'd have to be a time traveler. So the deal with JP Morgan, you saw this with Soros. You also saw it with the Hunt brothers. When you have enough money, you can corner a market, and then you can manipulate price. And that's until we have, more governance around commodities trading and Basel III and a lot of this stuff that prevents some of the manipulation. I don't think there's a way around that. There's always going to be people with more capital that want to control markets. And they've done the math on it, and the amount of fines that they're going to pay are less than what they're going to be able to make. So until the fines actually outweigh the reward for manipulating markets and participating maliciously, people are going to do it. I don't really care for that or want to operate in that way, but at the same time, I understand why they participate in that capacity and how it's done. Once we do see Basel III come into effect and the paper derivatives that we see on the COMEX today disappear, they've still got to deleverage about little less than $1 trillion in these paper derivatives. People are going to continue to manipulate the market, and again, I don't think you need to be a time traveler to figure that out. It's very lips are dry. Well, you know what? It's cold here in Texas. Not as cold as other places. It's actually like 80 degrees today, so I don't know why I'm saying that. I'm headed back to New York on Thursday this week, so yeah, it's definitely cold up there. The Hudson is frozen, and it's moving ice across the top of it. So shout out to people up north. I hope you guys are staying warm. This person says 110 in Australia. I would take 110 over the current, winter time that we're dealing with any day. Personally, that's because I grew up here in Texas and I'm used to the heat. All right, and then I think we got one more super chat before we move into the other ones here. I try to get through all of these. I know I run my mouth a long time, but hopefully, you're getting some information here that you're not getting anywhere else. We got Mr. Beer. They say, great live stream tonight. I sent $20 super chat. Thank you for the super chat, by the way. They say, my question was, as a Canadian, does it make sense to buy the maximum contribution amount in XRP ETFs in our TFSA? I'm assuming that's a retirement account there in Canada for tax-free gains. Typically 100K by age 35 and goes up 5 to 7K a year. Ideally, I own XRP directly to borrow against it in the future, but tax-free gains is a big plus. Though thought of selling post-price appreciation, but then considered not being able to buy spot XRP at that point. Your thoughts? Thanks. Actually just had a conversation on my way home about this. So I can't tell you what to do. Again, I'm not a financial advisor. I can just tell you how to think through this stuff. And I'm not as familiar with these qualified accounts in other jurisdictions. I learned the other day that you can borrow against your self-managed super fund. Here in the US, you could borrow against your 401k. You cannot margin assets inside of an IRA here in the US. So now you can own XRP inside your 401k. I don't know anybody that does that yet, but it is possible. So for that product, that's a consideration. I don't know what the regulation is there in Canada, if you could borrow against it or not inside that retirement account, but that's a huge benefit if you are going to be holding XRP over the long term. Your ability to be able to borrow against it or lever it while it continues to increase in value and not have any tax implications is awesome. And to your point, if it's kind of like a Roth IRA, that's great that you guys can contribute up to $100,000 by 35. The reason they do that is they know that money is going to be locked up in markets for a long time. Because you can't take distributions or do much with it until you're 59 and a half. Again, I don't know the age there in Canada. I'm just referring to what we have here in the US. But I would expect that it would be sometime around that same age that you'd be able to access that capital. So that capital ends up locked up in markets for, call it 25 years, and would stabilize markets, right? So they want to incentivize people to do that. Here in the US, you can add, if you're younger than 55, $6,500 per year to your Roth IRA. And then if you're over 55, I believe you can contribute up to $7,500 per year. And you can backdate 1 year. So if you are looking for tax savings this year, and you're filing an extension or haven't filed your taxes yet, you could go ahead and fund your IRA, your Roth IRA with those amounts, up to $13,000 if you're under 55, and up to call it $16,000. Actually more than that now, because it's 55 or 65. So yeah, it'd be 13,000 or 15,000 if you're over 55 years old. So just a thought, if you haven't filed your taxes yet and you do want some more write-offs, that's a great way to do it. Again, but to your point, there's considerations there, right? Should you buy it and hold it, outside of that product? If you can't leverage it, and you're also limited to the ability to generate returns inside of those products, because again, they're very similar to ETFs in how that money can be invested. You don't have the same liberties that a DAT would, like to be able to leverage the asset and generate income through other means. So again, I would talk with a financial advisor and have that conversation. You could absolutely reach out to Digital Wealth Partners and they can kind of navigate that with you. I can only tell you what I've done. When I was younger, I liquidated my IRA in kind and took the XRP out and took the fee and the taxes, but that was at 30-cent XRP. It's not at what it's at now, so it would be substantially more on the tax implications had I waited. So if you just bought it recently, you know, again, I can't tell you what to do. That was the best choice for me at the time. I'm still in my 30s versus, you know, somebody that's in their 40s or 50s. And they may also have, you know, assets outside of that. If that's your only allocation, there's a lot of variables here to be able to think through and make sure that you're navigating. So again, I would seek a financial advisor to help you with that. All right. Now that we got through the other super chats, we'll get into the super chats for tonight. Here we go. We got Roscoe. What's going on? He says, "Hey Jake, mastermind member, awesome dude. Glad to have you in the community. Is our right to self-custody our digital assets in jeopardy with the current version of the Clarity Act?" I think over the long term, most people aren't going to want to. The majority of the population does not want to self-custody. And so the equivalent that I could give you would be, you know, prior to the 1960s, people took stock certificates and put it in their house, like in their safe. That's effectively what you're doing with your crypto. You're buying it on an exchange and then you're moving it to a storage device that you have ownership of. There's just a lot of liability with that and responsibility that comes along with it. You don't get the assurances of holding it in institutional custody with the insurance and other things. But there's a lot of assets that just don't have, the infrastructure's not built for it yet, right? Like we're still waiting on HBAR and XDC over there, trying to get that, you know, across the line. But as of now, you know, they've done it on the B2B side, but they haven't done it on the wealth management side. So stuff like that, hash, you know, I've talked about that one on here before. I mean, there's a lot of different digital assets that you're probably going to have to hold on your Ledger or your Tangent wallet or your Decent wallet or your EliPal. You know, whatever cold wallet solution you're using. We like Decent. I think they actually have a Valentine's special that's running now through the end of the month. If you want to learn more on that, I think you can just either email us or you can follow up on social media and, you know, comment below this video or on other posts, and my wife will send you the link. I think it's like a twofer. I think you can buy 2 wallets for like $209 or something. And just full disclosure, we're an affiliate for them. We make like $5 on each one of those that you buy through us or our link. You know, it's not how we make our living, but I want people to have a good resource if, you know, they need that. So I think it's people's right to self-custody. If you wanted your stock certificates, you could probably go get them, but I don't know how many people are going to do that at this point, right? Like, it's much easier and safer to transfer those electronically and have them held with a custodian. That's why BNY Mellon has, you know, $60+ trillion in AUC or assets under custody. I think that people over the long term, especially as quantum computers and other things come to market and are at scale, there's just going to be a lot more potential for loss. Not that there isn't already. People get scammed all the time, unfortunately. I wonder if this person says, I can see, well, let me click out of this and restart this real quick, and maybe this person says no sound on YouTube. How about now? Brown cow. Motive? Yeah, we should be good. It's low though. Let me turn it up a little bit here. Can you guys hear me now on YouTube? I'll scroll down to the bottom and make sure. Every once in a while we get technical difficulties. It says breaking up. Other people say sound is fine. Okay. All right. As long as you guys can hear me, we'll keep rocking along. All right. So back up to the super chats here. I don't think it's in jeopardy. We actually advocated when we worked with the SEC to draft the rules for RIAs that people could still hold assets on their own cold wallet. So, with all that being said, I don't think it's going to go away anytime soon, but I do think that there will be, probably an adoption of institutional custody at scale, and we're working on solutions for that right now. We got Rick Johnson. He says, "Can you please name the CCs that the cryptocurrencies that have Clarity? So, if no Clarity Act passes, would they be okay for price appreciation in that environment?" As of today, the only three that I'm aware of that have Clarity in the US are Bitcoin, ETH, and XRP. There are no others that I am currently aware of. So that would be, those would be the only ones. And like I said, that's really where XRP has the advantage, is it's really the only thing that's scalable for real-time payments versus those other two. Again, he says, Rick Johnson, good to see you, man. He says, Mr. Popeye's flex. I don't have forearms like Popeye. I don't know if you guys saw those cartoons. That's nostalgic for me. Him eating the spinach and then beating the socks off people. Anyway, he says, why are we riding on the ETH ledger? I was told that vaulted XRPL was so awesome, but we ride the ETH ledger. What's up? When will we start riding our own ledger if that's so good? So, again, sidechain. We've seen that you can implement lightweight smart contracts on the XRPL. So Hyperledger is a direct derivative of the XRPL, with some differences in the way that it was brought to market and the total supply and other stuff that Jet's done. But they've implemented Sora-band smart contracts on that chain, which are lightweight smart contracts. We could absolutely do that on the XRPL. The Hook sidechain, I think, is the test environment or the test net for implementing that on the mainnet. I do think that that's where we're headed. I think that that'll eventually roll to the mainnet alongside these other amendments that they're passing for borrow lend and pseudo accounts and liquidity pools and all the other stuff. But you're still going to need more robust smart contracts to be able to facilitate different things. And that's where the EVM is valuable. So when he says ETH ledger, I'm assuming he's talking about the EVM, which is the Ethereum virtual machine. The EVM sidechain allows for interoperability between the mainnet and the XRPL with other EVM compatible ecosystems like Onyx and Axelar. Okay, so we need that as a bridge for other financial institutions to be able to adopt this, network as the back-end settlement for everything at scale. And you need some way to be able to move that value over there. The EVM sidechain is that solution. So things are going to start on ETH, and then I think we'll migrate to the EVM sidechain once there's enough liquidity in XRP to provide the additional, efficiencies that promises. But until then, you're going to see RLUSD minted on other chains that are compatible with the EVM, and they continue to mint on the EVM sidechain as well. And I do think that that's where the majority of the liquidity and the projects that were built on Ethereum, now that they've kind of said that layer 2s are not the way that they're going to go, will migrate, is going to be the XRPL EVM sidechain. This person says, the reason XRP spiked on Kraken on November 15th was because Dave Portnoy bought 1 million worth at one time. That's quite possible. Again, limited supply and high demand, and that's just $1 million buy on one exchange, right? Imagine billions of dollars flowing into XRP all at once. That's the type of volume we need to see in order for it to be across the market and for it to have enough liquidity for them to start being able to use it. Teresa, how's it go? Good to see you. Said thank you, sir, and thank you to the team and of course the tea lady. Keep it up. Thank you, man. I appreciate the kind words and the support. I haven't mentioned the mastermind. We are going to bring some things back, so we're going to allow people to come in for $2. Again, if you want to go use the code BeyondBroke, all capitalized, the number 1, and then MO like Mary Oscar. It's up here at the top of the screen on YouTube at beyondbroke.com. We just had a lot of back and forth, and what's near and dear to my heart is really the ethos of why we started the community, which is we want to help 1 million people become financially free. And we do have a large community at this point, over 16,000 members, and we want to see them be successful, but we also don't want to inhibit other people's ability to get access to the information there. Some people just want to test it out and see if it's worth the time before they, commit to a higher payment. And so, again, we're bringing back the code. If you want to use Beyond Broke, all capitalized, the number 1, and then MO like Mary Oscar gets you the first month for $2 there in the mastermind. Rick Johnson again with all the super chats. Thank you, my man. He says, Mr. Flex, been 2 years since the HBAR video. Update for the info, please. And then we'll get on to the rest of them here. So HBAR hasn't gone anywhere. It's just continued to iterate and grow. And I think that it's going to be extremely successful in the future. That or Hash are probably my number 2 for ROI over the long term. I do think that the majority of Web3 dApps will be built on HBAR. I think that HBAR will likely be the backbone for a lot of the permissioned black box AI solutions that come to market over the long term because of the security measures on that network. You've got, many large council members that are participating there. And I'm still super bullish on HBAR. Number 2, he says, many say their system is better than XRP's blockchain. Are they a threat to the XRPL if they have price appreciation? There are better technologies for faster like Holochain has, a huge amount of throughput and volume. Hedera Hashgraph also has, high security and high volume and throughput. What I would say about the XRPL and what's unique to it is the compliance components that are built in through the amendments that they've announced over the last year, and the interoperability and the DEX, right? So the depth that it has for the exchange of fiat currencies and other assets moving through XRP and being routed on the XRPL. Vet, if you guys don't follow him over there on Twitter, he put out a really good post earlier today, in fact, about the DEX on the XRPL and how that actually works to be able to route payments depending on what currency pairs you're swapping between. So, all of that being said, I still think XRP and the XRPL sit uniquely positioned to have the most adoption for back-end settlement for institutions and enterprises over the long term, with or without the Clarity Act. And then last but not least, he says, number 3, price prediction for end of 2026, 27, and 30 for HBAR. Where are we at right now? Let's look at HBAR as we sit today. Not HBAT, HBAR. We're currently at 9 cents. We've seen HBAR as high as 43 cents back in 2021, and then we really haven't had that amount of appreciation again. It looks like the cycle that we're in for HBAR right now is similar to what we saw for XRP in 2021. If you look at the chart, you can see, kind of the all-time high, which would be similar to XRP in 2017, 2018, and then a smaller bull run that we had over the past, year here in 2025, where it moved aggressively up at the end of 24 alongside XRP, and then we've got, a descending triangle back down, creating a base on top of, some of the other supports, which used to be resistance for the asset. Again, not a TA guy. I know enough to be dangerous about this stuff. With all that being said, if it takes the same duration for it to get into another bull market here, you could see, it all really depends on adoption and utility and clarity around the asset. I do think that it's going to be long used, but it's going to have enough liquidity in it. The unique value proposition on HBAR versus some of the other networks is the fees on the network are dollar denominated. They are not in HBAR. So you still pay in HBAR, but it's always a fixed fee that's dollar denominated. So as the asset appreciates, it takes less and less of the asset to pay the fees on the network, which is unique. Whereas, XRP and some of the other ones, they would have to pass an amendment to drop the fees on the network. But the fees on the XRPL are already, 0.000012, or there might be one more zero in there. Very little amount of XRP required. Less than a penny to send $1 million on the XRPL, and that'll continue to be the case even at high value for XRP. So, price predictions for HBAR, it really just depends on which market it's going to get adoption in. If it is Web3 dApps and decentralized applications, I don't know, in the time frames that you mentioned. I think over the long term, you could see $1,000 HBAR. Maybe I'll just go to 2030. 2030 and beyond, I think you could see $1,000 HBAR if it does get adoption in all the different verticals that they're currently targeting. We got Sofa King. He says, Jake, you said Elon told a close lady friend of yours that XRP is the one to buy. Was it Miss Shotwell? No, it sure was not. Number two, hypothetically, if your dominoes don't play out, will XRP be single digits by 2030? I'm pretty confident that my dominoes are going to play out, so I don't really see that being a possibility. But if we don't have a supply shock to drive the price significantly higher, it's going to continue to follow the market. So as more liquidity moves into crypto, you would see more liquidity move into XRP by 2030 with the tokenization of 80% of the economy. Irrespective of my domino theory playing out or not, I think that you would absolutely see XRP beyond single digits. But it wouldn't move to the prices that, a lot of us are hoping for and believe in without those external catalysts. TBH, 19 trades, thank you. They say, hey Jake, the XRP Godfather, I'll take it. From wherever they're from, thank you. 14K XRP, price appreciation, 1K XRP, want to gift my parents $100,000. Is there a way to access liquidity without selling, or is it smarter to sell 100 XRP and W8 them for our Asian firm later? You could gift it. I don't know what the gifting laws are there in your jurisdiction. You would likely have to cover the tax on the gift for them. So just be aware of that. I don't know what the tax rate would be. If it's long-term capital gains, how you want to facilitate that. You could... Gifting's probably the easiest way to transfer that to them. Or you could use the XRP to produce cash and then gift them the cash, right? Or you could borrow against it. Those are really kind of the three options: is to gift it, use it to generate income, or borrow against it to provide that liquidity in order to be able to make that gift to your parents. I don't know if that answers your question or not. I'm not sure of the specifics in your jurisdiction, but hopefully that gives you, some questions that you can go talk to a financial advisor about, or somebody else that's competent and capable as far as tax law in your area. Three Lions says, thank you for all that you do. Does there exist any ratio mechanisms in liquidity pools between Bitcoin and XRP, or does XRP go down when Bitcoin does due to pure market sentiment? The second one, as for now. I do think that there'll likely be a liquidity pool for XRP and Bitcoin over the long term, and I do think that XRP probably is the solution for Bitcoin sticking around when we do see the inevitable situation that's going to play out where liquidity leaves Bitcoin. But as things sit today, 90% of the market is spot traded, and they will take out leverage longs on Bitcoin and when they get liquidated, they have to cover that collateral or those losses, and so they liquidate other positions in order to be able to cover those losses on Bitcoin. And that's why you see the market move down in tandem. And oftentimes altcoins are more affected than the Bitcoin price. So that's the dynamic that exists today. But moving forward on the other side of it, I think that there's a possibility that that could shift based on the mechanisms that you stated there. Maui Girl, very cool. She says, Jake, the chiseled king of XRP. I'm not as chiseled as I used to be. I need to get back in the gym. But it's wintertime. You know, you need a little extra fluff to keep you warm. At least that's my excuse right now. But I am going to get back on the diet. We got to get ready for XRP Vegas, baby. We're going to have a full party there. Excited about that this year. So anyway, back to the question. They say, please explain how the SEC XRP comprehensive proposal as a strategic asset impacts price appreciation timelines. ChatGPT says 18 months and 4-digit XRP on that alone. Break down the price appreciation timeline for us. Again, it's predicated on the macro events that I've laid out again and again and again. If you want to go, listen to that, which you may have already, it's on the YouTube channel. I just did the 4th iteration of the domino theory, which is the last one that I'm probably going to be able to make before price appreciation happens. I've been talking about it for 2 years next month, the cascade of dominoes that would need to play out in order to be able to get to a 4-digit XRP. But yeah, I mean, you have clarification from a lot of different bodies at this point, and I would, all of those, you need the compliance component there in all of these jurisdictions for it to see the adoption and utility that we are all hoping for. Again, appreciate the super chat. ChatGPT and these other LLMs are great for a lot of things. They're not perfect. And again, they're probabilistic. So if you queue it asking on how this could happen and continue to feed it information on how it could happen, it will curate its narrative toward you to allude to that outcome or pacify you. And again, the deterministic AI that I think is going to come forth in the future will be a little bit different on that side. Ace Ventura, Pet Detective. It was one of my favorite movies growing up, by the way. My wife despises the gentleman that's in that movie. He played the mask. Jim Carrey. There you go. I love Jim Carrey, though. Actually, if you haven't listened to any motivational talks by Jim Carrey, I would encourage you to look that up. Obviously, he's known as a comedian. One of the things he talks about, I'll get back to this in just a second, we'll answer your question. This is actually a really impactful story. So he used to drive up to the top of Mulholland Drive when he was a struggling comedian and visualize himself, being in movies and making a bunch of money. And he was in a ragged out car, and he would do that to kind of make himself feel better at the time. He actually wrote himself a check for $10 million for acting services rendered that he put in his wallet. That was dated Thanksgiving Day, 1995, 1997. I don't remember which year it was. I think it was 1995. And about 2 months before that check would have been post-dated, he was paid $10 million for his role in Dumb and Dumber. And again, if you don't like the slap comedy, it's not here or there, slapstick comedy, but that just shows you the power of visualization. I know that sounds woo-woo, but people have the power to manifest lots of things, and what you focus on is what comes into your reality, and you'll also see the opportunities for those things if you're focused on it. So really love Jim Carrey for that. And again, he's got a lot of really good motivational talks that he gives. So back to the question here. If I have an iTrust account, could you still work with me? Do I have to transfer my crypto over and pay the taxes first? So we transfer in kind. You just fill out a form and you can transfer it over to DWP. There are no tax implications or fees for doing so that are outside of any fees that iTrust would charge for transferring the assets, but no taxes. It's not like you have to liquidate it and then send it over to us and then rebuy. We do the transfer in kind from them to us. you're good there. I think iTrust provides a good product. The advantage that I would say we have, that's the advantage, the difference that we have versus iTrust, they use Fireblocks as their institutional custody. We use Anchorage for all of our assets. They're a qualified custodian. They have insurance up to $100 million on the account. It's segregated, bankruptcy remote, all those things. And then we also have a product that we brought to market that's an algorithmic trading strategy for your XRP inside of your IRA product or account that'll generate additional cash and XRP for you by trading the asset. And because it's inside of an IRA, that's either tax deferred or tax free, depending on the type of IRA that it is. And so you can make all of those trades without the tax implications and generate additional XRP in cash. We partner with Arch Public. I did a whole podcast with Tillman. If you guys want to go watch that, where we go over some of the things that they do and the product itself. We actually just started subscriptions to that. So the first cohort of people, I think, will get implemented in that strategy around March 1st. And they will be able to start generate additional returns inside of that, qualified account for us there at Anchorage and with Digital Wealth Partners. So, and I heard that iTrust is also working on other solutions like that. Again, there's a lot of good providers out there. We would love to work with you if you'd like to transfer over to us, and then you get an advisor and all the other fun stuff that we provide as well. Flying CK13, they say, evening legend. What's up, my dude? I've converted my crypto all into XRP, which has significantly increased my bag. My question is, after price appreciation, we expect HBAR XLM hash to remain under $2 to $5 to purchase in bulk. It depends on how fast the Clarity Act gets passed, or if it gets passed, right? Like we talked about at the beginning of this, with midterms and everything, that definitely looks like it could get pushed out even further. Obviously, people are hopeful that it'll get passed sooner than later, as am I, because I think XRP will appreciate before the Clarity Act gets passed. But, that's kind of what you mentioned here. So, it's possible that all of those stay low. I do think that hash will probably still be under that threshold. HBAR and XLM. Where's XLM? HBAR is at 9 cents. XLM is currently trading at 16 cents. Highly possible that those are still underneath those price points post price appreciation for XRP, and if you're able to access liquidity against your XRP or generate income with it, you could absolutely buy a lot of that because of the price appreciation on the other, and then see the long-term upside in those assets that I think, again, these are my opinions, they're not financial advice, likely will take place based on the adoption of the asset class itself. Luke, Mr. Crow, he says, "Hey Jake, Luke here from north of the border in Vancouver, Canada. Dad got me into XRP. Watch every Monday and Wednesday night with great anticipation. Your confidence in XRP is inspiring. Keep it up, sir." Thank you. I appreciate the super chat and the support. Hopefully you're learning something. Again, I try to come on here with different stuff and talk about macroeconomic events and how I think about macroeconomics and the different components that are all playing together. I didn't get any of this in college. I've had to figure all this out on my own, listen to people that are a lot smarter than me, and then kind of cobbling it together in order to create my thesis, which again, I advocate for this. You guys, I love that you watch me, and I really do appreciate it, but I would encourage you to go get other opinions throughout the space and then come to your own conclusions. That's what I try to do. I watch other people that I think are extremely intelligent and then try to think critically through those things in order to be able to drive where I think the market's headed. So I would encourage you to go do that. But again, I really do appreciate the support and the continued watching and, again, just the participation. I don't say this enough. The clients and the people that work with us, Digital Wealth Partners and Digital Ascension Group and in the Mastermind, none of what we're doing right now is possible if you guys didn't want the products and solutions that we're bringing to market. So thank you so much to all of our clients and everybody that participates with us. It's afforded us the opportunity to be able to partner with really big players in the industry and bring cool things to market. 2Prime and the Fidelity product for Bitcoin is a big deal. We've democratized access for that. So you used to have to have at least $10 million to even approach them in Bitcoin. We've pulled that down to $500,000, and I think over the long term we'll be able to even further democratize access to that. Same thing with XRP and other digital assets. We'll continue to bring products to market that benefit the masses. Again, our goal is to help 1 million people become financially free and be able to do that through crypto. But none of that is possible if you don't have institutional custody and advisory and these traditional products that have been married with crypto to be able to generate returns and leverage and options and derivatives and all of the other things that TradFi has had for 20, 30, 40 years. We're just recreating that with digital assets, which is really cool. So again, I appreciate everybody. I feel very blessed and humbled to be in a position to create these things, and then also just very thankful for everybody that wants to participate. So thank you. About the journey, they say, hey Jake, if you held a smaller bag of XRP, 10%-ish on the rich list, but also bought a few thousand shares of XRPC in a 401k and Roth, what would expect that the XRPC would do after price appreciation, take gains, or hold? It's in your 401k, so it is a tax-deferred account. Again, this is a question for a financial advisor. It's not something that I can really give you a hard answer on. I don't currently have any allocations to any of the ETFs for XRP. We have some allocation to Ripple Equity and XRP and other private investments. Somebody asked me the other day, how my portfolio was constructed at one of the family office events that I was at, and I was like, it's 95% XRP and 5% private equity. Which is true. And then I have the small allocation to hash, right? But all that being said, I do think that the ETFs will perform exceptionally well when XRP's price appreciates. I mean, you can borrow against your 401k. I'm not advocating for that, and we have these products where people are able to borrow against their XRP. We've had people margin called. Unfortunately, this go around, we did have some people lose some assets in this last liquidation, even with, our partners giving them some grace and time to be able to kind of cure those margin calls. Unfortunately, some people were just overextended and not in a position to be able to do that, and so they did get some liquidated, which not fun. But I've told you guys, right, like, you need to be responsible. You don't want to take too much LTV. You need to be able to make sure you can service the debt and cover the capital call if there's a situation. And yeah, it wasn't a lot, but for any amount of XRP lost, that's not good. We don't want that. And so it was sad to see, that happen to a couple people. But it was much better off than what would have been a smart contract. A lot of people were able to cure their margin calls and had no issues. So it was a small portion of our client base that had that happen. 1010 we didn't have any because we had immediate market recovery. This one, because it was longer and drawn out, some people were margin called and they thought that the market would reverse, and it didn't come back in time. It continued to drop and they got kind of caught out, which sucks. But anyway, you could still borrow against that ETF out of your 401k. Again, not recommending that. If it's in a 401k, I don't know how old you are, but you'll be able to benefit from that. And if you do have some XRP outside of that, I think that that's probably a really good way to look at it is, you've got stuff in your retirement account that's for long-term retirement, and then you have other stuff that you're going to be able to put to work and live off of and do things with in the short term to supplement your income until you are able to quote-unquote retire on that other allocation. And again, I'm not a financial advisor. I would speak with somebody over there at DWP in order to figure out what the best solution is for you and your family. We haven't talked about the LLC, but I'll go ahead and throw it up here. The majority of our clients do have an LLC that they manage their digital assets through. It's a holding company. We register in Wyoming, provides you creditor protection and anonymity. If you want to work with us on that or learn more about it, you can go to digitalfamilyoffice.io and use the code 50OFF, 50 OFFDAG LLC. That's 50 OFFDAG LLC. Get you everything end to end on that for $2,000. Which is, basically the cost of the operating agreement if you went to a traditional attorney. You do need to set it up the right way. It does not need to be a trading company. Ideally, it's a single member LLC that's just disregarded entity, and you're working with, again, somebody that knows what they're doing. We've done over 7,000 of these LLCs for people and a lot of living trusts alongside those to mitigate probate. If that's something you're interested in, again, you can go reach out to the site over there. And I think DWP has free consults at this point if you qualify, and we may be doing that over there on the DAG side as well. We already went over this one, a bunch of the super chats. Let me check over here. Mike is always good about sending me the super chats over here on Discord in case I miss them. I don't see any messages from him yet. No, that's a different one. So I'll wait. No, just kidding. All right. Always kicks me up in the chat. I'm going to go all the way to the bottom and work my way back up. So, this is kind of the cutoff for the super chats here. I don't want people spending money and then not getting their question answered. So if you're watching and you haven't super chatted yet, please don't, because I feel bad. I'm going to work my way up from the bottom of the list here on the super chats. This person, thank you for the super chat. They say, why does Brad Garlinghouse believe XRP will hit $10 this year? But you do. You know more than the CEO himself. Laugh out loud. I talked to Brad the other day, and I won't talk about that conversation. Never mind. We're scrolling on up. We're going to find the next super chat here. John says, do you think that Flare will move up alongside XRP when XRP goes up? I think all boats rise with a rising tide. I think anything tied to XRP is going to see additional liquidity move into it. Even meme tokens, other stuff issued on the XRPL. Again, not advocating for you to go, throw money in on meme coins or anything like that. Those are highly speculative investments and obviously, kind of a joke deal. There's often rug pulls on that, but I do think that anything attached to the XRPL will likely see significant upside in the event of price appreciation for XRP. You guys are doing good on the super chats. I don't see a ton here. I think we might be able to get through them all tonight. We got Burn. They say Trump is owning the economy with midterms coming. Reverse carry trade is the antithesis to what he needs for midterms. Do we reconcile and get increase in XRP? So it's a good point you make. So Trump only has really 2.5 years left. Well, really, like 3 years left of his term. If there's certain things he wants to accomplish in that time frame and really make a huge impactful change, there may not be a way to avoid the volatility, because he's not going for re-election, right? If he does want the Republicans to stay in charge, or the majority in both the House and the Senate, market volatility would not be good for that, to your point. However, if you could see huge deflationary effects across the economy and a repricing of goods, and your money went further, you actually became richer, which I know sounds crazy, right? Like, if assets come down, how do you get richer? Well, our money's worth more, and it goes further, right? So if you had a repricing of assets that allowed the average person to be able to buy more and get ahead, that would actually be beneficial, even though like nominally they might be worth less on paper. If their currency was worth more and went further, I think people would advocate for more of that. It might take a little bit for people to figure that out, though, unless you saw an immediate effect in stores. So if you saw a huge downturn in markets, but XRP appreciated and we were able to shore up our currency to be able to participate in the global economy, which I do think we'll do this year. You know, you've got the 250th anniversary that is showcased that at the Super Bowl on July 4th this year. They do plan on, issuing the gold-backed treasuries, as far as I'm aware, for the 50-year duration. Judy Sheldon. Still think Judy might end up the Fed chair. There's a 3% chance on Polymarket over there. I don't know what that's about. Obviously, he's already nominated the other person, so for that betting to still be up, it's kind of weird. I'll have to see how that plays out. I would love to see Judy in that position. But all that being said, here's the other piece. If we went to war and Trump was commander-in-chief and there were executive orders, you could skip midterms altogether in that type of situation. I'm not saying like martial law or anything, but maybe that's the plan, right? If they actually do go to war in the Middle East, you might see, that at least get pushed out or something else take place. Maybe there's something that we don't even know on that side. B2G, great name. What do you think about GSX Global Settlement Network? They're working closely with institutions. We're presenting at Davos. Do they tokenize to possible Ripple future partner? I don't know enough about it to speak on it in an educated way. Unfortunately, it's not something that I was even aware of, but I'll take that back and go look it up and see what's going on and report back. I appreciate the super chat. Again, I try to be candid with y'all. Like, I'm not going to make stuff up if I don't know. I'm just going to tell you I don't know. This person says, join the mastermind in December. Is 2026 a write-off on appreciation? It sure is if you have an LLC to manage your digital assets. That is education. So any type of education for your investments or anything that might be correlated with the management of those assets inside that company would be tax deductible. So any, publications that you subscribe to, any events that you go to and travel to make connections, or, get education on a topic that's involved with the investments there, all of that is going to be tax deductible, which is another great part of being about the mastermind. If you have an LLC to manage digital assets, that absolutely is a write-off. All right. We got Textured Puma. What's going on? They say, hey Jake, can you explain how Corda will use XRP versus how it will use Solana and XDC? Well, when we worked with them for a short period of time, I can't talk about what we worked on with them, but I can talk about some of the conversations we had early on. We actually asked that question because we knew that the Corda Settler could use XRP or XDC. And in the conversation when we asked them about that, and this was a while back, okay, so things could have changed. I don't think so, but they could have changed. We said, which one of these would be the better asset to be able to settle between the ecosystems that we're creating? And they said, well, we're only going to use what has regulatory compliance here in the U.S. So only one of those things you mentioned currently has clarity here in the U.S. is not a security, and that's XRP. So until the Clarity Act gets passed and we have full clarity on if those other assets are securities or not, or what they are, I'm still highly convinced that the only option for them to be able to settle between those ecosystems is XRP. And you can also go look at my business certification through Corda on my LinkedIn if you want to. Mr. Bob Jenkins, he says, Jake, the Legend Wizard 3000. Appreciate the compliment. Thank you, sir. He says, thoughts on Apex Crypto Insights saying Ripple equals the IMF, orchestrated theater, lawsuit, and predetermined ESDR. So if you want to go give this a Google, you can look. There was a paper written by the IMF back in 2014 where they talked about an exchange rate peg. And the abbreviation that they used in that publication, or that white paper, was XRP. At the time, Ripple had renamed what was originally minted as XNS and is now XRP. They had rebranded it Ripples. And once that paper came out, they rebranded Ripples to XRP. So if that tells you, I mean, I think there's a there. I think the IMF and Ripple do have a significant relationship. When it comes to XRP being the ESDR, the ESDR is a basket of 7 different sovereign currencies, 6 or 7. I'd have to go look that up. I want to say it's 7, G7 nations. Based on GDP, is how much, of each currency they hold in the basket. That is the SDR. XRP doesn't function in that capacity. It would be the liquidity that would allow exchange between those, and it could be a reserve asset for them being a liquidity provider. But I do think it'll be the exchange rate peg, like that's the name, and that's why they rebranded to XRP, and they don't call it the ESDR. I think if it was going to be the ESDR, it would be something different. Now, XRP could sit as a currency in the ESDR if Luxembourg or Liechtenstein were to adopt XRP as the currency for their country. That's been speculated before too. So I do think that it could sit as a component inside of the SDR, but I don't think it's the ESDR itself. But I do believe, to your point, that the IMF and Ripple have had plenty of conversations. That's illustrated by the photos of both Brad Garlinghouse and Christine Lagarde at the IMF, meeting in 2017. Obviously, Christine Lagarde went on to be the president of the ECB and has continued to tout, the Euro stablecoin, the CBDC over there. Interesting how people move from one place to the other. So, all that being said, again, I don't think the XRP is the ESDR. It could sit in the basket, but I think it'll facilitate or sit in the spot of the exchange rate peg, working with the IMF. Shadespot says, if your investors have the percentage return of the growth and income funds, then you do, Jake. Are you willing to share how they performed since inception? So I can talk about the original income fund and the growth fund. There are other products that we offer at Digital Wealth Partners that I cannot talk about because of regulations. Not because I don't want to. I would love to talk about all of them. But if you want to learn more about those products, you can reach out to Digital Wealth Partners, and they can give you that if you are an LP in the fund. The two that I can talk about are the income and growth fund, like you mentioned. We're at 5% on the income fund, and I think they were closer to like 2 or 3% on the growth fund at the end of the year. And there will be audited financials that are passed out to the LPs in those funds in the near term. So, again, I think, how do I talk about this? There are some other products, there are Digital Wealth Partners, that have not performed as well, that were launched later, that I can't talk about publicly or share returns on because of the compliance and regulation around them. So other people out here in the crypto sphere may have been shared those documents illegally because they're not an LP in the fund, and then decided to go post those publicly in places and solicit for the fund, which is illegal, by the way. And again, that's not me saying that. That is the SEC and the laws that exist. Again, I would love to come on here and talk about everything that we have, but I can only talk about the 506C, Reg D, 3C1 funds that we have publicly available for accredited investors. So again, If you would like to learn more about any of those options or opportunities, you're welcome to go to digitalwealthpartners.net, schedule a consultation, and you can have a conversation with the advisors over there. All right. Truth of Hearts, good to see you. They say, do you think there's a probability that we might be looking at 2027 for $100 price appreciation? If you firmly do not think it will take that long, what's your reasoning? That's my reasoning. Well, if you just look at the macro events that are playing out right now, do you think it's going to take another year for us to have a spike in oil or conflict arise in the Middle East? I don't. I mean, we have half our military over there right now. That's not for no reason. So that is the catalyst. A spike in oil will cause the Bank of Japan to have to raise interest rates, and that cascade of events will eventually lead to Project Ion being used on the back end of the stock market, demand on exchanges surging from the exchanges themselves, utilizing XRP to be able to settle value. And this person says it's not half. It's half of the, okay. So there's a large portion of the Navy that's there, and then there's, I don't remember what the bomber is, but like half of the certain amount of bomber is over there in the Middle East. So it's not half of the military, excuse me, you were correct. It's a half of one of the certain size planes that we have that's in the region. Which is like, anyway, there's a lot of military personnel in the region right now. So all that being said, I don't think it's going to take another year for that conflict to escalate, especially with the timing of these amendments on the XRPL and some of the other products and other things coming to market like Evernorth. My spidey senses are tingling, and I feel like things are probably going to happen sooner than later. Again, if I'm off a couple months here or a quarter, nobody can predict timing on this stuff. It is event driven. There are macroeconomic things that need to play out in order for that type of price appreciation to happen. But again, we're at the same place that we were at the end of last year, and we're just, what are we at? 40 days into the month, 40 days into the year, this year in 2026. Things are starting to look spicy. So we'll just have to see how things play out here in the near term, but I'm pretty bullish on 2026. And I would tell you Ripple is also. This person says, does market cap matter? I actually just put together a white paper on what I'm calling the liquidity index. So it's an equation that I've actually derived that allows you to come to how liquid an asset is. And I think that that's a much better metric for how to quantify certain assets in the crypto space. Now, obviously not all of them are going to be suited toward that, but it is a really good indicator, the way that I've structured it, to be able to provide a grading tool on that versus market cap, which is what most people use for traditional stocks and equities. Money Matters greatly says, is it even possible that the reverse carry trade can hold off another year? I really don't think so. And we somehow end 2026 in our current position due to the reverse carry trade not happening yet. Again, huge fan. Love your honesty and loyalty. Appreciate that, man. Thank you for the super chat and a great question. I know people are twiddling their thumbs waiting for all this to play out. I have been for 2 years. I feel like Michael Burry. Like, he saw that coming from a mile away and started telling people about it and positioning himself. And obviously it worked out really well for his fund. I feel eerily similar to that situation. It'll be 2 years ago in March of this year that I started talking about that. So, I do not believe that the reverse carry trade can hold off for another 12 months. You've got bond yields in Japan at the highest that they've been in decades. You've got all the catalysts right here on the precipice of them paying out. in order for that rotation to take place. You have all of the things in place to be able to stabilize the bond market as those treasuries return to the U.S. And the world to move into a new financial paradigm. Like, all of the stuff's ready, and we're right here on the precipice of the Clarity Act as well. The U.S. wants to be the ones leading the way for that. And what better way to, I don't want to say remain the global reserve currency, but remain a significant player in global affairs than to disintermediate yourself. And I think that's what the U.S. government's done with XRP. I think that there's a lot more to Ripple and this network and what it's going to be used for and how it's going to play into the U.S. being able to maintain the majority of its status as a global superpower moving forward than people really understand or realize. We're almost at the 2-hour mark, and I think we're going to make it through all of the super chats. Bob, my man, he says, Mr. J, you can call me Bob. I'm in the mastermind. I plan on using DWP after price appreciation. My question is, I have a friend who has XRP who wants to use DWP after price appreciation, but he is not in the mastermind, and he is worried he needs to be for DWP. Thank you. So we will work with anybody, right? Like, the mastermind obviously gets additional perks and benefits, and we try to make sure that we provide additional value to that community. But, you know, on the other side of price appreciation, we would love to work with anybody and everybody that's holding a substantial amount of XRP. And substantial amount, I mean more than a couple thousand, right? And really even less than that over the long term. I just don't know that they're going to be in a position to be able to participate with us, you know, at $1,000 XRP. If you only have 500 XRP, you've got $500,000 at that point, which, you know, would qualify under our current circumstances. And we may, you know, over time democratize access back down to that level, but just with the volume of people that we anticipate coming in, we're likely going to have to raise that threshold in the medium to short term. And then over the long term, be able to, you know, democratize access as we scale, and build things for scale. We're working on a solution right now as an all-inclusive app for people to be able to manage their digital assets, their banking, all of their, you know, compliance for their LLC and their other entities, all in one streamlined solution that we're bringing to market. And I'm excited about that. I don't know how much longer it's going to be before we get to market with that, but again, we would love to have you in the mastermind. It's $2 right now if you want to go try it out. It's, you know, you can use the code Beyond Broke, all capitalized, the number 1, and then MO up there at the top of the screen at beyondbroke.com. Get you the first month for $2. We are going to lock the mastermind down on the other side of a $10 XRP, where it'll be invite only. So, but yeah, don't feel hard sold or like he's got to be in there. But again, you know, we are going to always provide additional value to that community, discounts, access to things early, a bunch of the other stuff there. So if he wants to try it out for $2, we'd love to have him. Again, all you got to do is go to beyondbroke.com and use the code BeyondBroke, all capitalized, the number 1, and then MO like Mary Oscar, all capitalized, get you the first month for $2. Rockin' HL, they say, I don't know how to ask this because I don't know enough about economics, but if other countries are going to use XRP also, are they buying just the same? Why hasn't that moved the needle more on supply? That's a good question. So Ripple has over 1,700 pre-negotiated contracts from early on. Greg Kidd had one of those, and he talked about it's basically an option on XRP to buy it at 0.03 of a penny for 1 billion XRP. I think that these other pre-negotiated contracts are very similar for these sovereign nations, institutions, enterprises that need a significant allocation to the asset to be able to facilitate business and global trade. And they will execute those when the time's right. So that's, you know, if you already had a pre-allocated amount and you knew that you were going to get that, you don't need to buy a ton more because you probably already negotiated what you need. And that's why we haven't seen the additional volume there. But we do have sovereign wealth funds, we have DATs, we have ETFs, we have other treasury companies and plays that are coming in and buying XRP that have allocated at least $2 million worth to buy it. And I think that you're going to see some additional institutional FOMO once some announcements are made and we do see price appreciation. Again, I don't know that there's going to be much available on the exchanges for retail to purchase post-price appreciation. I think that there's going to be private OTC deals that are done at a premium above and beyond the actual spot price for XRP, very similar to gold. So that's my thesis. Again, I'm just one dude. You should probably get information from a lot of different parties before making decisions, and always speak with a financial advisor. But all that being said, that's my 2 cents on why we're not seeing the buy volume from other sovereign nations at scale, is because they have already negotiated a certain amount of XRP for them, and that might come out of the escrow. Three Lions says, please explain how permission domains provide built-in clarity and KYC to the XRPL. Okay, so it's a good question. We launched digital identity on chain. It was XLS 40, and then you had credentials. So digital identity alone isn't attached to a wallet. It needs some mechanism to be able to attach to a wallet. That's what permission domains are. They are your wallet with the KYC information and your credentials, which could be you're a QP or an accredited investor or whatever other qualification you need to be able to participate in certain ecosystems. Well, all of that will be attached to your permission domain and allow you access to certain opportunities on chain or DeFi ecosystems or different order books in order to be able to have purview of those things or participate. Without that, digital identity and credentials really didn't have anything to attach to in order to be able to facilitate that benefit. So now we just need permission dexes, and that'll allow for order books and different environments for those that have access to be able to participate and have purview of the transactions that happen in that ecosystem on the mainnet, which is basically a zero knowledge proof. It only has visibility for those that have the credentials to be able to view it. So hopefully that explains kind of the building blocks and why that's capable and why that was needed. Flytrout says, thoughts on privacy with XRP using Midnight Network. So I think that's a big deal. I heard, and I don't know this to be true or not, but I heard Charles Hoskinson got liquidated for $3 billion just recently in this last downturn in the market. I hope that's not true. I would feel really bad for him if that's the case. We met the family office that was managing his portfolio and Wave, which is where they were holding their Cardano. We tried to reach out to them a couple times because we have another large family office that holds a significant amount of Cardano that we wanted to help, get access to that, and they didn't ever really respond for whatever reason. We met them at Rare Evo. But anyway, all that being said, I think that Midnight's going to be huge. I know that they were raising like $500 million to be able to get that to market. We actually, I won't talk about that. So anyway, I think that that's definitely a large component when they get that to scale. I think that's going to be a big deal for the XRPL, and I don't think that's too far out from happening. Brent, Mr. W, he says, hey Jake, seen some chatter about the IMF and the escrow, a lender of last resort, either totally or partially. Thoughts on this? Yeah, I think that they probably do end up as the lender of last resort. So if you want to go back and do some history, you can look at the IMF and their participation in Bretton Woods in 1944. John Maynard Keynes proposed the Bancor coin at the time, which would have sat as a global reserve currency, kind of like the ESDR is touted today, as a liquidity provider and lender of last resort. Obviously, the dollar became the global reserve currency out of that conference. We had, the gold to be able to back it. Then we touted that we'd be able to, maintain that peg, and people would be able to redeem their dollars for gold. And so they had fixed exchange rates with the other currencies globally, and they backed it to the dollar. And then obviously over time that was eroded, just like every other nation state that's ever been in power. We exported our inflation and hollowed out our manufacturing. We used to be the world's largest creditor nation. Now we're the world's largest debtor nation. And so it's Triffin's dilemma is basically what that's called. And any global reserve currency that is a single nation state or sovereign country that issues the currency that the world uses to be able to facilitate trade will end up doing the same thing. China would eventually hollow out its manufacturing and ship it offshore to be able to export its inflation if it became the global reserve currency. Same thing for Russia. What XRP does is it sits as an intermediary, a neutral bridge asset that doesn't allow any one nation to have that power or abuse it or export their inflation, and they have to operate in a level playing field on their own merit to be able to generate GDP and global economic output. And that's why I think it's going to be adopted and disintermediate, all that we've seen for global reserve currencies over the past 500 years. Money matters greatly again. Appreciate you for the super chat. You mentioned, we already did this one. Got a couple more here and then we'll wrap it up tonight. We got Shark Week 589. They say, can you tell us when it's signed finally, the new loan terms and interest on borrowing against XRP, hopefully 2-year loan at 8 to 9%. I would love that. We will definitely, you guys will be the first to know, I promise you. Thank you for the super chat, Shark Week. This one says, Mr. Thomas Man Blake. He says, hey Jake, have you seen what Will Von Lowe has said about oil and natural gas prices coming in the future due to the replacement issue of new production wells? If you haven't, you might check out his interview with Tony Robbins podcast. I would love to. I love Tony Robbins. I'll have to go check that out. It's not something that I've currently seen or could really talk to, but I appreciate the heads up, and I will check it out. We already said this one, the privacy network. And then we already did that one. Again, just to touch on this one more time before we wrap it up tonight. If you need an LLC, we've done lots of podcasts and webinars and other things on this. You can go to the website at digitalfamilyoffice.io and actually watch the little video that I have there on the benefits of the LLC. But you get creditor protection, you have anonymity, you're able to use the full breadth of the tax code to be able to offset tax implications, and you can use the code 50OFF, 50OFF, LLC. Get you everything end to end. We've done more of these LLCs than anybody else in the world. For people to manage their digital assets there out of Wyoming. Registered agent, EIN, articles of organization, template for the operating agreement, certificate of good standing, banking memorandum, and a total corporate veil service to make sure that you maintain the segregation of assets and the corporate veil for that creditor protection, working with Laughlin, our partner. All for $2,000. And this one's good. Vegito Black says, Jake Griffin. Look, Blake's a good-looking guy, and he's successful. I'll take it. He says, not financial advice. Do you see a $1 flare possible by the end of year 2026? If not, when would you think that would happen? Thanks, man. Again, I don't know that I want to speak to any specific price for flare, but I've talked to Hugo. He's super bullish on it, obviously. I think that, he's actually just now headed back home after 3 months of traveling to go back to Dubai. So shout out to Hugo. Appreciate all his hard work and all the travel and speaking that he's been doing and, getting out there. I do think that Flare is huge. I think it'll absolutely be, integrated and used to help facilitate value transfer for XRP. The mechanism by which they reflect the value on chain instead of issuing a new token is absolutely beneficial for tax implications, the way that things work here in the US. And again, anything attached to the XRP ecosystem as it appreciates, I think we'll also see some significant appreciation. Brad said this lots of times, but all boats rise with a rising tide type thing. And I think as liquidity pours into XRP, you are going to see price appreciation for some of those tangential assets like Flare. Down to the wire here. I'm trying to see if there's any more super chats before we wrap it up. I think I got through all of them. Let me see if there's any over here. No, I don't see one. I'm going to go all the way to the bottom and double check. And we had one more here. How is it possible for XRP to reach $1,000, like you've mentioned before, considering the token is not scarce in volume? And J Cleaver we trust. So again, it's the best analogy I could give you would be like diamonds. Okay, so diamonds aren't scarce. De Beers has monopolized that market for 30, 40 years. And white diamonds, you know, people regard them as being valuable, but they're really not rare. Similar to XRP, if there is a certain amount that's available on the market and there's significant demand that is far outside of what's available, you can orchestrate a supply shock on XRP. Even if, you know, the total minted supply, a total circulating supply are significantly higher, the available supply can be substantially less. Again, like, if you saw the amount of diamonds that are actually available, they're not worth barely anything. And now that you have lab-grown diamonds, white diamonds have come way down in cost. Colored diamonds are still very expensive because they're rare and, you know, kind of anomalies. They're not supposed to exist, really. Actually had a full lesson on that at the previous family office event I was at. So that's what I would say to that, right? Like, that's a tangible real world application where you can see that the price of something is substantially higher than what it would be if the total supply was available on the market with the same amount of demand. The same thing will happen to XRP, where there is an orchestrated supply shock where there's not much left on the exchanges. Everybody needs it all at one time, which pushes the price substantially higher. And then you'll have payment flows that start moving over the network at scale to be able to hold price stability at that high price. That's my thesis. Again, I'm just one guy on the internet. I've been researching this for 6 years. I've talked to Citi, Goldman, BNY, Fidelity, you name it, large financial institution, MasterCard, Visa. So, you know, again, I think that I've probably had a unique perspective based on those conversations and other stuff that I've found. But everybody has their ability to go do their own research. And if you feel differently, then obviously you would invest differently. We'll take this one as the last one. We got Husker Nation. They say, keep up the great work, Jake. Have you had any experiences with MEV bots? I'm doing a tiny experiment where it's staked for 180 days and I'm impressed. It's not something that I know about or looked at, but I will go check it out. Maybe it's EVM. Maybe he typed that the wrong way. MEV is what he put on there, so I'll have to go do some research. But I am going to wrap it here. Again, appreciate you guys taking time out of your Monday night to come and hang out with me and ask fantastic questions. As always, you know, we would love to have you in the mastermind. Again, our mission there is to help 1 million people become financially free. If you want to go check it out, you can join for just $2 if you use the code BeyondBroke, all capitalized, the number 1, and then MO like Mary Oscar gets you the first month for $2. No contract, month to month. If you don't like it, you can cancel anytime. But with 16,000 people there, that should probably tell you, you know, how much value is provided inside that community. I'm in there, like I've been part of a lot of other masterminds, and I try to do way more and create way more value than I ever received in masterminds that I paid $3,000, $5,000, $35,000 to be a part of. I try to make sure that the community there has access to me and gets a lot of information all the time and stays up to date with stuff. So again, would love to have you there. If you need wealth management for your digital assets, you want an advisor, you want to have a conversation about how that fits in your total portfolio, you can go over there to digitalwealthpartners.net and use the contact us form. They do have free consults for those that qualify. The minimum is 50,000 XRP. And we do advise, you know, that you set up an LLC most of the time or a trust to manage those digital assets, whether you're domestic or international. We will take individual clients over there if you want to do it. But again, you know, recommend the LLC. And if you need the LLC, again, you don't have to work with us. You can go watch the video that I have on the webpage and go try to do it yourself or work with another attorney. If you do it the right way, I don't think that you're going to find it any cheaper than $2,000. And if you want it for that, all you got to do is use the code 50OFF50 OFFDAG LLC. That's 50 OFFDAG LLC. And with that, we'll wrap it. I hope you guys have a wonderful night, a wonderful week, and we'll see you on the next one. Stay blessed. Appreciate you, Tech Talk.